And I will pass it over to our board president. Board President, you are currently muted.
Thank you. I had problems with my mouse here. All right, let's call the meeting to order, and I'd request the board secretary, Dr. McIntyre, to see if we can make quorum.
Excuse me, I had to unmute as well. All right, so we'll go ahead and take roll. I'll start with Dr. Wong.
Present.
Dr. Turetsky.
I'm here.
Dr. McIntyre is here. Dr. Garcia.
Present.
Ms. Brandvine.
Present.
Dr. Kawaguchi.
Here.
And Mr. Moridomi.
I am here.
Wonderful. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's go to the next item on the agenda, public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Moderator, will you open it up for public comment? Just as a fun fact to know, I just realized that if I hit the space bar on my keyboard, it takes me on and off mute. It seems to be a lot easier than trying to find my cursor and moving my mouse around to hit the mute button, but that's up to you. All right, moderator, please.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda, please click that Q&A icon at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. And it looks like we do have a few individuals who have requested public comment, and we'll go in the order that they are received. So first, we will go with individual identified as concerned applicant Taskeen. You will be given 2 minutes to speak and a 10-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Taskeen and I'm a licensed optometrist in the state of Texas. I started the process of applying for a license last March after marrying a very proud Californian in February of 2020. My initial plan was to apply for a license in March and wait to receive it a few months later before relocating to California. But the prospect of a long-distance relationship during the pandemic was not feasible. It has now been almost a year since I first applied to practice optometry in California, and I still have no information from the staff as to when I can expect a conclusion to their investigation. By August 18th, I had submitted all of the necessary documentation for Part 2 of the application. I did not hear back from the staff at the California Optometry Board until early October after sending several follow-up emails. In October, I received communication stating that my application had been submitted to the enforcement unit. As context, in 2019, a patient complained to the Texas Board of Optometry about a visit to an office that I was filling in at. The issue was reviewed by the Texas Board, and the board and I mutually agreed to me shadowing a retinal specialist for a day due to the complaint. I have always been and still am in good standing with the Texas Optometry Board. After learning that my application had been submitted to the enforcement unit, I volunteered all of the information from the Texas investigation to your staff and asked them if they needed any other documents. I also made myself available for any questions or concerns. Throughout this process, I have been given no timeline for how long the investigation could take. I have been flat out told that there is no timeline in those quotes exactly. I have requested information on the procedures of the investigation to no avail. I asked why an investigation is necessary since the issue occurred over a year and a half ago and was already addressed by the Texas Board of Optometry and received no response. During this past year, I have had no income and have been financially dependent on other people. I've not been able to practice a profession that I love. I'm reaching out because I have no other hope for answers. I request that a member of the board share their email information with me so I can share additional details about this awful process with you. And I would like some transparency as to how much longer I will have to wait for answers regarding my license. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and we'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Bonnie Delator. Bonnie,
can I ask questions of that?
Unfortunately, we're not able to comment on items not on the agenda. We certainly, though, will have staff, and we are aware of this applicant's issue. Staff in licensing and enforcement are working concurrently, and we will, of course, move some resources in order to make some movement on this case.
Hello? Hello?
This is the moderator. Mr. Moridomi, were you able to hear Shara's response?
Hello? Hello, hello? Moderator, can you hear me?
This is the moderator. I can hear you, Mr. Moridomi. Are you able to hear us?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Non-substantive questions to the last public commenter. The question is, when you send an email to the board staff, how many days does it take to get a response to the email?
President Mordomi, I apologize to interrupt. We're not actually able to have a dialogue because this isn't an item on the agenda. I also am concerned, as the applicant has made it clear, there is an enforcement case that was open in another state, and just want to be careful in case this does end up coming to the board for some sort of action later on, that any interaction here could in fact jeopardize your ability to handle that enforcement issue without having appearing to have had some ex parte communication that wouldn't be allowed. Conflict, exactly. There'd appear to be a conflict because this conversation had occurred.
If that's my only question, I'm really concerned about board responsiveness to emails. So I don't care about the facts of her case, but I would like to know about how responsive we are to questions from the regulated community.
We would certainly be willing to provide numbers to you, Mr. President. I'm not sure that the experience of one individual previously licensed with an enforcement case would have the same experience as other applicants or licensees who are in contact with the board, but we certainly can have a conversation about the timelines within this particular instance and what our standard timelines are.
Shara,
Okay.
Shara, we'll be discussing enforcement actions in agenda items, won't we? General timelines and number of cases. Possibly we could bring up a general question then.
We do have our enforcement report during the executive officer report, and of course could have some exchange. I'm not sure that we would have data on communication times exactly, but of course we could discuss more of that during that agenda item.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, my question isn't related to enforcement, and that is if some member of the public or a regulated person sends an email to the board, I want to make sure that we are responding in a timely manner. If nothing else, to say, hi, we've gotten your email, we can't respond right away, we'll get back to you in a week or 5 days or next month, as opposed to the email going into a black hole. I mean, I've worked for other public agencies, and oftentimes those emails come in and it's a black hole, and I don't think that's the kind of customer service that we want. So that was what my inquiry is about. All right, thank you. We can move on. Next speaker, please.
All right, this is the moderator, and our next individual is requested public comment, is identified as Bonnie Delatorre. Bonnie, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 10-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My comment is not regarding the COVID-19 immunization waiver, but the Assembly Bill number 443 regarding immunization certification and the California optometrist license renewal. California optometrists have been eager to acquire their immunization certification. SCCO has had 3 APHA pharmacy immunization programs with over 60 plus California optometrists certified by the APHA. SCCO's motto has always been education before legislation. So regarding the optometric license renewal, with the board's permission, the university intends to advise RODs that 15 hours of the 20-hour course can be used for their license renewal in the other category as therapeutic continuing education. COPE category, systemic disease, using pH pharmacology as the designation. Many companies in California will not reimburse CE unless it can be used as part of their relicensing hours. So if this is not discussed in section 5 today, I'd like to please put it on the agenda for the next board meeting. And thank you for taking the time to hear my comment.
All right, this is the moderator. It looks like that was our last individual who has requested public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
All right, the Q&A feature is now closed.
Moving on to the next agenda item, the President's report. I see that my written President's report or message is attached. I think the most important point coming out of it is that we need, or we would like, additional candidates to become members of both this board and the DOC. So for all our millions of listeners or viewers, if you know some good people who are interested in affecting policy related to the practice of optometry and opticianry, please submit your applications to the governor's office. I believe my President's report or message had the links, etc. I never thought I would be on the board of optometry until the governor's office suggested it, and I've been on more than 5 years, and it's proven to be very, very interesting, educational, and fun. And I love all the members that have served with me on this board. I learned a lot from them. They've enriched me. Unlike other boards, this does not take an incredible amount of time. And we have some just great staff that provide exceptional support. So I really encourage you to apply. As far as the Dispensing Optician Committee, it's still a brand new committee, and they and we are affecting the future of the practice of opticianry. And they're treading on areas that have never been discussed before in terms of the practice of opticianry, which is, I'm sure, a growing field. I mean, you look at every CVS or Target or Walmart, you have opticians. And then you have the interstate and the online. So if you want to have an effect on that policy, that's your opportunity. We have the strategic plan also attached. I believe that this is the final, and the board gave us me and one other board member whose name I've forgotten. Was it Glenn or Deborah, or was it David, to finalize the strategic plan and publicize it. So this is the final plan. And then last but not least, I've made assignments to board committees. I think all of you board members know which committees you're on. Members of the public can go onto our website and see who is on what board committee. I believe that's all I have to say about my President's report. Shara, am I forgetting anything? Let's move on to the next item then. Actually, why don't we open it up for public comment, just in case there is public comment.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please click that icon with a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, this is the moderator. It looks like at this time there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, the Q&A panel is now closed.
All right, let's move to the next agenda item, item 4. Do we have members of someone from the Department of Consumer Affairs or the Budget Office? Oh, I see Carrie Holmes. Hello, Carrie.
Yes, hello, Board President Moridomi and board members. I'm Carrie Holmes, Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you for inviting me to provide a department update to the board. On February 11th, the DCA waiver was approved to allow optometrists with specified training and certification to order and administer COVID-19 vaccines. DCA offices remain open with preventative measures to safeguard the health and safety of our employees. Public health measures such as distancing, face covering, and frequent hand washing are required for employees who cannot telework. Thank you to board staff who have been working so hard to maintain excellent customer service to protect the public through these challenging times. As always, one of our top priorities in Board and Bureau Relations is appointments. I'd like to echo what Board President Moridomi said earlier. The Governor's Office does need applicants for these positions. If any members know of great candidates, or if any members of the public attending the meeting are interested in serving, please find the link titled Board Member Resources on DCA's homepage to apply for an appointment. For current board members, 2021 is a mandatory sexual harassment prevention training year. This means all employees and board members are required to complete the training during this year. I'd also like to remind you that Form 700 filings are due April 1st, 2021. You as board members are designated appointees and required to complete a Statement of Economic Interest Form 700, even if you have no reportable interests. If you have any questions about how to file, please contact the department's Conflict of Interest Filing Officer, Jill Johnson, in DCA Office of Human Resources. I'm pleased to let you know that the Board and Bureau Relations, in partnership with Solid Training, has developed a brand new board member orientation training to be held on WebEx March 11th. As a reminder, newly appointed or reappointed board members are required to take this training within a year. To register and for more details, please visit DCA Board Member Resources. Finally, I'd like to let you know about 2 exciting new initiatives launched by DCA Director Kirkmeyer for 2021 to enhance DCA's services to all boards and bureaus. The first is the Enlightened Licensing Project. This work group is being formed to utilize licensing subject matter experts within DCA. The group will help individual boards and bureaus streamline and make their licensing processes more effective and efficient by utilizing best practices, information technology, and cost-saving measures. The second is an executive officer cabinet. This group of board and bureau executives will maintain regular communication, provide feedback and information to DCA, and assist with special projects that will impact all boards and bureaus. You'll be pleased to know that your very own executive officer, Shara Murphy, is a member of this new advisory body. DCA is grateful to her for her willingness to serve as a leader among her executive officer peers. These 2 new initiatives are just kicking off, so I'll keep you updated on their progress and impacts. As always, Board and Bureau Relations is here to help. If there's anything we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out. That concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Board President Moridomi.
Thank you, Carrie. If you stay on the line, I'd like to open the floor up to any of the board members in case they have any questions for you. Board members, go ahead and chime in. I'm not hearing any board members with any questions.
I do have a question.
Who is that?
Dr. McIntyre.
Please, doctor.
Carrie, regarding the BMOT, I know we're supposed to take it, the training within 1 year after being appointed. Don't we have to take it every other year thereafter? Like every 2 years?
No, the board member orientation training you just need to take within a year of appointment or reappointment. So usually
with a okay,
Mhm.
I just got
Yes.
confused because I was reappointed, so I took it again. Okay, now I understand.
Yes,
Thank
so
you.
you should be all set.
Anyone else?
So this is just for clarification. This is Dr. Wong. In regard to the waiver for optometrists to perform injections or the vaccination, how would someone who is certified go about getting or using the waiver to, or what process would someone who has taken an injection course have to go through in order to be able to certify that they've taken the course so that they can perform, be involved in vaccinations?
So the waiver is pretty much self-contained. So licensees would need to go through the steps outlined in the waiver. And then as far as where you would administer vaccines, that would vary. So I probably couldn't offer advice on that. But I believe Shara will be covering that later on in the agenda as well.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Carrie, thank you very much. When I got news of the waiver, that was fantastic news. I know members of the board and members of the profession have been eager this past year to do what they can to help in addressing this worldwide pandemic. And I'm hoping that we can get a lot of optometrists to the front lines to help out in the vaccination. It's very encouraging. A friend of mine got a vaccination at the Oakland Coliseum, and she was vaccinated by someone from the Federal Department of Agriculture. I don't know what their qualifications were, but I know they were not doctors. So I think, and they were from like Lassen County all the way down in Alameda. So I think having optometrists joining the force is going to be a great thing for the state. All right, let's move on to our budget report.
And we're joined by our new budget analyst, Bikram Dhaliwal. Bikram, are you with us?
Hi, Shara. Yes, I am.
Bikram,
Hi, Bikram. Thanks for...
Yeah, thank you. Bikram, before you start, board staff, I'm trying to find in my inbox the written report. I know it was sent out late, and it's not on the board website, I don't think. Can you tell me which email it was attached to so I can follow along Bikram's presentation as he goes through the numbers? Or tell me where I can find it on the website.
On the website, it's actually agenda item number 4B on the meeting page.
Okay, and it's 4B. Okay, I'm sorry. Give me a moment. I have many computer screens open in front of me. Why don't you go ahead and start, and I may interrupt you if I have problems.
Okay, sounds good. Well, good afternoon and happy Friday, members of the board. My name is Bikram Dhaliwal, and as Shara mentioned, I'm the newly assigned budget analyst to the Optometry board as of December 2020. So it's just been a few months, so I'm just getting used to everything that's going on. And so today I'm here to provide a general budget update as we open up the fund condition statements, which were part of agenda item number 4B on the website. I believe you guys should all have them in front of you, but if not, I'll just try to outline them as best as I can. But
yeah, Bikram, I found it. Thank you very much. It was item 4B. It was on the public website, and I hit that link. Thank you. I couldn't find it before. As you give your report, as I'm looking at this report, try not to speak in acronyms, and if there are columns or lines that you're addressing, kind of delineate that so I can see the actual numbers as you describe them. I see it, there's acronyms PY, CY, BY. I think I know what they mean, but try not to rely on acronyms. And as an initial question, these numbers, are they actual dollars? Are they in thousands? They seem rather small to me.
Yeah, they're in thousands, and
okay,
and
maybe
I will
this
do
time.
my best to avoid acronyms as much as possible. But yeah, like you mentioned, PY, CY, BY, those will just be prior year, current year, budget year. But other than that, I'll do my best to avoid acronyms and say the full word as much as possible.
And direct us to the column and line you might be talking about when we're going through this. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, of course, no problem. And thanks for pointing that out. So yeah, I'll quickly outline some of these items here. There's 2 fund condition statements. So I know there's 4 pages total, but overall it's 2 fund condition statements. One is for the Optometry Fund, which is 0763. Those will be the first 2 pages. So I'll cover those first. And then later on, I'll get into RDOs, which is the Registered Optician Fund, I think. And so that's 0175. So I'll get into those later on. Those are pages 3 and 4. But yeah, just to start things off, the first page we see here in the top left, it says beginning balance, and that's pretty much self-explanatory. But overall, it's the starting point of where the fund starts in every single year. So if I were to go with the first column where it says PY 2019-20, those are actuals because fiscal year 1920 closed in October. So we have the actual numbers for that fiscal year. So you see that beginning balance of 2,765, which is in thousands, so it's technically 2,765,000. So that was the beginning balance at the start of fiscal year 1920. And then we had a small adjustment that was made just as DC Department of Consumer Affairs accounting closed some numbers after the previous fiscal year was wrapped up. So we had that 71,000 there as an adjustment. So then overall, the adjusted beginning balance for 1920 was 2,694,000. These are numbers that I believe were probably already presented on at some point in terms of actuals, because 1920 is, we're already past that. So I don't want to spend too much time on 1920, but I can definitely answer some questions on that if need be, because the revenues are there. So the next section are the revenues. So for 1920, those are actuals. And you see the different line items there, delinquent fees, renewal fees being that big driver of what brings in the most revenue. And so you will see that across the board in every single fiscal year. Renewals are going to be the fee type that brings in the most revenue. And then there's a few other categories there too, like other regulatory fees, which includes citation and fines. And then there's other regulatory licenses and permits. Those are basically your application and licensing fees for the most part. That's the second biggest revenue driver. And then we have income from surplus money investments and a few other types of revenue that are definitely much smaller in scope in relation to the overall revenue that's generated by this particular fund. So overall in 1920, we had a total revenue of 1,786,000. And then we see that down below where it says total revenues, transfers, and other adjustments, because there were no transfers in 1920. So overall total resources, that 4,480,000 that you see there, kind of on the bottom left, that takes into account total revenue plus the adjusted beginning balance. So that's the number that we're going to be working with for the rest of the fiscal years as well, in terms of adding revenue and the adjusted beginning balance. So scrolling down to the second page, just to finish up 1920 real quick, we see the expenditure section. It's just broken out in 1111 program expenditures. That encompasses the entire expenditures and the net reimbursements. So it just bundles it all up in one line item. And so those are the numbers there. And then we also have some other things like supplemental pension payments and statewide pro rata. Those are pretty standard, and those are assessed every year. And overall, 1920 had total expenditures of a pretty nice clean number of 2,400,000. So when you take into account the total resources subtracted by the total expenditures, we get 2,080,000. That's the remaining fund balance for for 1920, which leaves us with months in reserve of 12.3. That's pretty good news overall. There was a reversion in prior year, 2019-20. So that ultimately helps with the current year, which is 2020-21. So scrolling back up to the first page, I'm now looking at the second column where it says CY 2020-21. We get that beginning balance of $2,080,000, which is the ending balance of the prior year. So we just kind of roll up into the next year. That's just how the numbers work from ending to starting and onward. And then once again, renewals. These are actually, as listed in the notes on the second page, for current year, for both revenue and expenditures, these are fiscal month 6 projections. So fiscal month 6 is December of 2020. So taking into account the revenue that has come in so far for the first half of the fiscal year, July through December, fiscal month 6, we are anticipating or projecting $2,082,000 total in revenue. And that's the projection based off half of the fiscal year. And the reason why it's $2,082,000, which is actually higher than what was initially anticipated based off the governor's budget, is because we're noticing renewal and a couple of the other fee types coming in and materializing at a much higher rate than we were originally anticipating. So going off of the first half of the fiscal year, renewals are coming in at a higher rate than originally anticipated. And as I mentioned earlier, that's the main driver when it comes to total revenue. And then when you add all that up, it's ultimately probably most likely at this point, we are projecting that revenues are going to come in significantly higher than the prior year and higher than what was originally anticipated when the governor's budget was being prepared. And I don't have the governor's budget 2020-21 numbers in front of me, but everything else that we're going to be talking from the rest of the fiscal years, which I'll get into in just a sec, those will be governor's budget. So anyways, yeah, that's current year revenue right there. And then we see that 117,000 directly below it as a negative. And for those of you who are not aware, the Department of Finance utilized control section 3.92. That's what that CS means right there, where it says loan to general fund per CS. That's control section 3.92, Budget Act of 2020. And what that basically means is that the Department of Finance has the authority to exercise that control section. And by doing so, they were able to take out 117,000 directly out of Optometry's fund, just as a transfer to the general fund loan because of the pandemic and the budget shortfalls and the deficits. The Department of Finance decided to tap into some of these special funds, which will ultimately be paid back with interest whenever there is no longer a need for that money in the general fund, or if there's a situation where Optometry's fund is deteriorating and it's in dire need of that money returned immediately. Otherwise, it'll be returned, I believe in a few years. I think it's going to be in 24, 25, or at some point. But Department of Finance has a lot of authority over that. So it is not something that I have in front of me in terms of when it's going to be paid. It's one of those things where it's kind of up to Department of Finance's authority. But it will ultimately be paid back with interest. So don't worry about that.
Can I step in here real quick? So most important, I think many of you who have been on the board for a while, you know we've done general fund loans before. We're doing one this year because of, as Bikram said, the heightened crisis within both the pandemic and then our business sectors. So this particular loan does not have a set date. Loans that we've done before will have had terms by which they need to be repaid 2 to 3 years. Due to the unprecedented situation, this does not have a set date, but it will be repaid before we are in a position of insolvency or needing to turn to licensees for a fee increase. So we're watching very closely about what sort of triggers we have as a board to make sure the money comes back to us before we have to make any drastic cuts or make any drastic increases to fees.
Right, and that's a good point, Shara. Thank you for mentioning that, because yes, ultimately it will be something that can be requested to be paid back on a shorter notice when, depending on if the fund's condition starts diminishing, and if we see that fund balance significantly get reduced, then yes, that 117,000 with interest will be something that conversation can happen with Department of Finance to bring it back sooner, as opposed to maybe going about some other avenues in terms of fee increases or something like that. So that is a good point. Thanks, Shara. And then, so yeah, overall, finishing up the revenues for the current year, 2020-21, when you take into account the total revenue of 2,082,000 subtract 117,000, we get to a total revenue transfer and other adjustments of 1,965,000, which brings us to the total resources of 4,045,000. And once again, that takes into account the beginning balance plus the total revenue transfers, etc. So moving down to the second page again, current year 2020-21, we see that 1,881,000. That is once again just like revenue for expenditures. We are using fiscal month 6 projections because we're already halfway through the fiscal year. So this is the closest number that we have right now that we're working with. And ultimately, 1,881,000 is actually really good news because that represents a 14.2% reversion, which means that as of now, we are anticipating that there is going to be a surplus of the money that Optometry was appropriated. It looks like because of savings in personnel services, attorney general, travel, and certain other line items and categories, overall, we are projecting that Optometry will save a lot of money in the current fiscal year. So even with a net appropriation of somewhere in the ballpark of it's 2,193,000 is the actual net appropriation for Optometry this year, but we're projecting that it's going to be 1,881,000 in terms of what's actually spent. So that definitely is good news in terms of saving money and reverting, because that ultimately helps the fund condition and the remaining fund balance. So with that being said, when you add everything up, the total expenditures as of now will probably come out something close to 2,024,000. And then when you take into account the total resources, you subtract the total expenditures, the remaining fund balance will be 2,021,000, which leaves us with 8 months in reserve. And I know that's a bit of a decrease from the 12.3 that we saw previously, but as I'm just about to get into, the reason for that is because for budget year 21-22, which I'll get into in just a sec, that is when RDO, the other fund, the registered, I believe it's registered opticians. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but it's because those two funds are merging. So when I get into budget year 21-22, we'll see a lot of numbers being significantly higher in both revenue and expenditures. And we just have to keep in mind that's because two funds are literally merging. So, you know, we have to kind of keep that in the back of our mind as we move forward, because it might not be easy to tell just by looking at the numbers. But anyways, so that wraps up current year 2020-21. After that, we'll get into budget year 21-22, which starts out with a balance of 2,021,000, which is the ending balance from the previous year. And then revenues, this is the governor's budget. It's not directly labeled there, but this is what's on the governor's budget, which was released on January 8th. So this ties to all the budget preparing process that we just finished throughout the fall of 2020, doing multiple drills like workload revenue, employee compensation, etc. So the revenue that you see here in the budget year 2021-22 column is what is ultimately displayed in the governor's budget. And with that being said, merged with RDO, we come to a total revenue of $2,778,000, and significant increases are coming from certain fee types like other regulatory licenses and permits. And that's because you combine the RDO application and licensing fees. That's obviously going to increase the amount because there's more revenue coming from those types of applications and licenses. And same thing with renewals; those will also increase, and maybe get into that 2.2 million range. So overall, that is going to increase the total revenue just because everything is going to be bundled up into one main fund. So that's the primary reason we're seeing a lot of these revenue types increase in budget year. And then, so overall, the total resources for budget year will be $4,799,000, which takes into account the beginning balance and adds the total revenues of $2,778,000. So scrolling down to the second page again for budget year 21-22, these program expenditures, the $2,862,000. Once again, that does combine appropriations being added for optometry and RDO. So that's why it's a significant increase there. But don't let that alarm you. That is just those two funds being added. That's why it's a significant increase in the appropriation. In addition to that, that is the net appropriation. So generally speaking, there are reversions that take place every year for multiple funds, and optometry is one of those funds, like I mentioned, for the current year. So once again, we will probably see a number for 21-22 that is significantly lower than the 2.8 million that you see there. That's just the net appropriation. That's the authorized amount that optometry combined with RDO will have to expend for budget year. And that does take into account some of the all the adjustments and BCPs and everything that was included in the governor's budget and the budget building process. So that's the final number for 21-22 as of now, unless more adjustments are made in the May revise and other adjustments throughout the spring and early summer budget building process. So we'll see if that number changes or not, but that's the number we're working with for now. And then overall total expenditures for 21-22, $3,039,000. You take the total resources subtracted by the total expenditures. Fund balance then comes out to $1,760,000 with 6.8 months in reserve. And I do want to note for the remainder of the fiscal years, budget year +1 and budget year +2. For display purposes, we keep revenue static just to be safe because we don't know how revenue is going to materialize for those years. So that's why you see revenue for those 2 years the exact same as the revenue for the budget year. So that's just how we do things. Those numbers will be adjusted and accounted for once we get to the fall budget building process in October. That's when we'll do the workload revenue drill again, and those numbers will get adjusted. But those are the numbers we have for now for revenue. And then for expenditures, however, for budget year +1 and +2, you see the expenditures increasing. And what we do is we take a 1.03% multiplier and apply it to the previous year's expenditures. And that's just to capture general increases in costs of doing business, other adjustments that are made, potential increases in costs. So that's why you see the $2,948,000. That's a 3% increase from the budget year, and then the $3,036,000. That's a 3% increase from the budget year +1. So that's just for display purposes because we feel like 3% is a pretty accurate or safe way to capture any anticipated increases in cost. So it won't be the actual final number, but it's just for display. So that wraps it up for optometry fund condition. I know I kind of spent a bit of time on that. I just wanted to break down all the different items, and I hope I didn't use too many acronyms. If there's any questions, I can answer them on optometry before I jump into RDO.
Board members, do we have any questions? Thank you, Bikram. That was very helpful. Probably one of the better budget presentations I've had in my years on the board.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Glenn.
So, Bikram, so one thing that you mentioned several times was utilizing first half of the fiscal year.
Yes.
How do you take into account? Because I believe that our fees vary month to month. As far as our income, I believe that it's cyclical and it varies month to month. So, do you also look at the years as a whole or trends?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, when I do, especially in regards to revenue, the revenue definitely does fluctuate a little bit month to month. So when I do revenue projections, I look at each month, and I also look at historical trends, like you mentioned, for prior fiscal years to get a sense of which months historically have looked like months that may have been outliers. So, for example, I actually happen to have the revenue projections in front of me. I know those are not a part of the agenda items, so I don't want to get too much into them. But for example, October happened to be a month where revenue was significantly higher than July, August, September, November, and December. So when I was doing projections, because that October was significantly higher, I actually excluded that a little bit because I felt like it wouldn't make sense to use that to project how the remainder of the fiscal year would be. I went more so off of the other months, which were much more in line around the 150,000 mark. So for July, August, September, November, and December, about 150,000 revenue was collected from all the different fee types, roughly, when you average them. But in October, we saw 357,000. So there was like a 200 plus thousand increase in October. And clearly that's the outlier. So using that and using historical trends and getting an average and a sense of what the remainder of the fiscal year was, I was able to then determine how the projection for how the revenue will actually materialize for the remainder of the fiscal year, with making assumptions where I feel like it's safe, or maybe going off of prior year, and so on and so forth.
And Bikram, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that as you and I had this conversation, that was also not an anomaly specific to our board. It was an anomaly that was seen across DCA boards. Is that correct?
Exactly. Thanks for mentioning that, Shara. I actually completely slipped my mind. That was an anomaly for basically all DCA boards and bureaus. It was either the month of October or the month of November, I want to say, for most boards and bureaus, where a lot of revenue was actually collected in advance. So that's why one month in particular spiked. And, and because of that, I felt like it wasn't maybe the best month to utilize when it comes to projections. But ultimately, what that means is more revenue was collected in the first half of the fiscal year than was originally anticipated, at least when you compare it to the overall projected revenue to be collected in the entire fiscal year. So if you look at the governor's budget for 2021, which we're not looking at right now because we're looking at fiscal month 6 projections, but if you were to look at that, it's the 1.9 million was projected to be collected in revenue for 2021. And I'm projecting, what does it say, 2,082,000 in revenue for 2021. So that's about a 100,000 plus increase in the revenue that I'm anticipating to be collected. So just to give an example, in the first 6 months, more than half of the revenue was already collected than was originally anticipated. So year to date. So I'm kind of projecting a little less to come in the second half of the fiscal year, just to be safe, but also to be a bit realistic. If that makes sense.
Yep, thank you.
No problem.
For me?
Yes, go ahead.
This is Sid Brandvine. I have a question for Bikram. Bikram, could you clarify a comment? You had mentioned that during this period of anomaly, revenue was we had additional revenues. Was that revenues accrued or not accrued? Are we taking revenue that has not been accrued across the state or for our board?
To answer that question, I would say that that was something that because there's like a 90-day window. I'm not 100% sure of all the details, but what I've been told is there's like a 90-day window that licensees and specifically licensees who are renewing have to pay their renewal fees, and it had to do something with DCA accounting, where they collected that revenue in advance, and then it just happened to hit the month of October, at least in the system, all at once. I'm not sure what you meant exactly on the accrual side, but I hope at least I answered part of that question in terms of accounting just what those increases in revenue in 1 month.
I'm asking because when you accrue revenue that you don't have and that you're hoping to get, that puts us in a little bit of a predicament for a state board.
Oh, like you mean like in advance of maybe the second half of the fiscal year?
Yeah, just accruing revenue that we do not have in our hands. We're advancing our reporting before the money is really there.
Oh no! In this case, the money is there. So in October, that money that came in October, that has hit the books. That is on account. And
I think Ms. Brandvine, it's actually the opposite, right? So these are renewals that came in previous months, but they were not actually in hand until October. And so everything in October hit at once because it was the actual dollars in hand as opposed to accruing months moving forward. This was actually a deposit of real funds.
Great. That's what I was trying to clarify. Thank you.
Thanks, Shara. I appreciate that.
Any other board members? Vikram, I do have one question. In determining or looking at the expenditures for current year 2021, I assume that you had numerous conversations with our staff such that you take into account any big expenditures that might come in the latter half of the year, like big attorney general bills or ALJ bills. Is that right?
Absolutely correct. Yes, we've had that conversation actually quite recently and over the past few months as well, and that's something we'll continue doing just to make sure the numbers are accurate as possible.
Great, thank you.
No
All
problem.
right, I see no other questions by members of the board. Why don't you continue to the Optician Fund?
Sounds good. So last but not least, we have the Optician Fund 0175. So now I'm referring to pages 3 and 4 of that attachment. And as we all know, this is a smaller fund, so we will see numbers, much smaller than the previously. But I'll go ahead and get into this. I do want to point out that the reason we see a lot of zeros in 2021, 22, and onward, so for those last 3 fiscal years, the reason we see a lot of zeros for renewal, expenditures, and so on is because the funds are merging. So that's just a disclaimer. But and I think that's mentioned in the notes. Yes, budget year includes merging of funds. So yeah. Anyways, once again, prior year 2019-20, these are actuals. So that year closed in October. So DCA accounting finished everything up for that year. And we have an adjusted beginning balance for RDO in the amount of $868,000. And the revenue came out to $680,000, with once again renewals being the main driver in the amount of $406,000. And like I mentioned earlier, actually, other regulatory licenses and permits, that's the second biggest revenue driver. And specifically for this fund, it seems like it's a revenue type or a fee type that is actually much closer to the renewal amount in terms of percentage than maybe, for example, some other boards. So that's another reason why when they're going to merge in the budget year, we see that particular fee type jump quite significantly. But anyways, just to wrap up the prior year revenues, the main category is renewal, other regulatory licenses and permits. The other ones are much smaller, but we got 13,000 from delinquent fees, 4,000 from other, and 21,000 from income from surplus money investments. Grand total of 680,000. And then when that is added to the beginning balance, the total resources come out to 1,548,000. And the expenditures for that program, for the RDO program for 1920, came out to roughly 418,000. And when you take into account the couple other direct assessments for statewide pro rata and pension payments, the total expenditures were 455,000. And then when that is subtracted from the total resources, the remaining fund balance for in reserve is 1,093,000. And as you can see, the month in reserve is 26.2. So that's really good in the sense that the balance in the fund is significantly higher than what the expenditures actually are. So there's a lot of cushion there. And as we get into it later, that's ultimately really going to help the optometry fund when they merge. That's really good news, in my opinion, just looking at the numbers. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for the prior year. Scrolling back up to the current year, we start with 1,093,000 as the beginning balance. And once again, that is the ending balance from the prior year, directly rolls over. So for revenues, these are fiscal month 6 projections, just like for optometry. And looking at them, renewals, I'm currently projecting those to come out to about 492,000, and the other application and licensing fees in the amount of 205,000. And then so when you add everything up, all those different 5 revenue types, the total revenue should come out to somewhere around 742,000. And then if you add the beginning balance with the total revenues, the total resources will come out to 1,835,000. And then moving down to the last page, for current year 2020-21 program expenditures, for fiscal month 6 projections, I am anticipating expenditures for this particular program to be somewhere near 469,000. That is pretty close to how much is actually appropriated for this program. So there isn't too much of a reversion there, but I think ultimately that's not too big of a deal just because overall revenues are coming in much higher than expenditures. So the fund looks good in that sense. Revenue, ideally in a ideal world, you want revenue to be higher than expenditures or somewhere close. So that is good news in the sense that total expenditures come out to 501,000, but total resources are significantly higher. So that leaves us with a fund balance of 1,334,000. And I know the months in reserve jump up significantly, but that ultimately just has to do with the formula of how that's calculated. But once again, that might be a little misleading because we are going to see this fund merge with the optometry fund on July 1st, which is the start of budget year 2021-22. So that's why we see zeros for everything when it comes to revenue and for program expenditures, just because now all of that is being captured on the previous 2 slides for optometry, at least in regards to budget year onward. So that's why, everything's zeroed out. I don't really have much to say about that other than 1,334,000 is left in that fund as a residual amount. And I don't have the exact date in front of me in terms of when that's ultimately going to get rolled into optometry. I have worked with DCA budget office management in terms of working out a scenario where the remaining balance of RDO is then plugged into optometry. I think we were looking at 2022, 2023. So that's something we'll look into in terms of when that fund balance is going to be rolled in to Optometry's fund, which is definitely significantly going to help because that will plug in an additional 1 million plus into Optometry's main fund. And which will, when you calculate everything, that's going to help the fund balance, the months in reserve, and all that. Which currently, the first two slides, even though those show the two funds merging, they don't show that remaining balance getting rolled in. So I think ultimately that's good news in the sense that once that balance is accounted for, we're going to see the fund balance and the months in reserve shoot up. And that's ultimately good news. So.
Great, Bikram. Do we have any questions from board members? Wow, I see a lot of shaking of heads. I don't have any questions either. That was, again, a very informative and clear report. Shara, anything else on this item? All right. Bikram, thank you very, very much. I guess we'll see you at the next meeting. And let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the Executive Officer's Report. Ms. Murphy, are you ready for that? I understand you have a video. Did I? No? All right. Maybe you're talking about my video. Sorry. Okay.
It's quite all right. Yeah, so we are ready to proceed with item number 5. We'll, of course, have our staff subject matter experts take on A, B, and C, and then I'll come in to give you the updates on D through G. So we'll start with Cherie Kimball, our Assistant Executive Officer, former enforcement unit leader.
Good afternoon and happy Friday, board members. So we do have a staff update in enforcement to give you today. The board's senior enforcement analyst, Matthew McKinney, accepted a promotion to serve as an enforcement program manager with the Veterinary Medical Board. His last day with us was last Friday, February 19th. As a smaller board with fewer levels of management than larger boards and bureaus, we have a unique opportunity to help state workers learn and polish skills, gain confidence and experience, and grow in their careers. Unfortunately, that can mean saying goodbye so they can continue to grow. In his tenure with the board, Mr. McKinney has coordinated the Continuing Education Audit Program and the Expert Witness Program, served as probation monitor, personnel liaison, consumer protection committee staff liaison, and lent his expertise to DCA's Expert Witness Program. He conducted the most complex and sensitive investigations, testified at hearings, provided training and mentoring to his colleagues, and helped steer the enforcement unit through staff shortages and turnover. Mr. McKinney was a valued member of our team who consistently demonstrated flexibility, diligence, compassion, integrity, reliability, and proficiency. It's been a joy to watch Mr. McKinney grow as an analyst, and while we are sad to say goodbye for now, Mr. McKinney is staying in the DCA family, and we look forward to opportunities to work with him in the future. We have begun the process to refill the vacated position and anticipate filling the position by May. In the interim, we are planning to hire a retired annuitant with experience in regulatory enforcement to come in and help us work some of the additional caseload. So moving on from that, in Q2 of the current fiscal year, the board approved 3 disciplinary actions and granted 2 petitions for early termination of probation. Those items all became effective in January. And then following that, we have the regular statistics. Are there any questions regarding those or anything else in the enforcement report that I can answer?
Board members, if not, I have a question. I know we'll be asked probably at the legislature during our sunset hearing about our timelines and average days that cases are pending. How are we doing on that? I see some interesting numbers, but is there some further information about our average pending days that you can add some commentary to?
So the average age of our pending cases has not increased significantly over the last year or so. We do have some older cases that have been with Division of Investigation, or maybe with both Division of Investigation and expert witnesses. So there are cases that take a little bit longer than others, and those are kind of dragging down the timelines, I think, right now. But like I said, I don't believe that the average age has significantly increased over the past year. Our enforcement unit is pretty good at keeping cases moving and trying to get them resolved as quickly as possible.
Okay, great. Now, we don't have that many high priority cases, but I see that, in fact, we only have one, but the average pending is 415 days. What are the usual causes of delays in high priority cases?
So the high priority cases are the ones that are most likely to need to go to Division of Investigation and then subsequently be reviewed by an expert witness. So they can take a little bit longer than a routine priority case. In that particular instance, there are actually 10 pending high priority optometry cases combined to make that 415 days. So some of them are going to be less than that, but some of them might be a little bit more.
I see. All right. So, I mean, if I get asked by the legislature, would my answer be the delays on the high priority cases are usually are cases that are being worked on by the Department of Investigation, and therefore we have, as the board and the staff, very little control as to affecting those timelines.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I think it's also important too that we look at these timelines against the best practices within DCA. That although these might seem like big numbers, that in fact we are well within the means of what best practices are for the department investigations.
All right, thank you. All right, I see no other questions by members of the board. Cherie, do you have anything else?
Not for enforcement.
All right, thank you. What's next?
We'll next have Natalia Leeper present our examination and licensing program report.
One moment, sorry about that. Hello, board members. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of my report for this board meeting. Just to let you guys all know that we've started to see the influx of our 2021 graduates starting to take their law exam. So we're gearing up and preparing for their part twos to be submitted in a couple of months. Making some last minute changes to Breeze and making sure that they have adequate contact information to give us so we can get a hold of them if we need to. In addition to that, we've updated our frequently asked questions in preparation for the new graduating season to make sure that they have everything they need in order to get licensed quickly and efficiently. Current processing times for new optometry applications is 6 to 8 weeks, and I'm hoping to keep that constant throughout graduation season, but we will see, but it is constant at 6 to 8 weeks right now. For Opticianry, we unfortunately did lose another optician employee, so processing times have gone up to 6 to 8 weeks from 4 to 6 weeks, but we're trying to keep it there as best as we can. Management is trying to backfill that position with a retired annuitant, so we will get some extra hands on deck, but that's still something we're looking into right now. And we will be getting a new office technician for the licensing program as a whole in the new fiscal year, which we are super excited about, and it should help us get back some of the traction we've lost with revolving staff. Are there any questions about the report or the stats that are attached to this that I can answer?
Board members, are there any questions?
I have a question. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time, but for the optician board exam, what's the pass rate typically averaging?
For the Opticianry national exam is for California around 48% last time I checked. That's not a great pass rate.
Right, and I knew it was low, but I actually didn't realize it was that low. Do we know why our pass rate is so low?
That's something that DOC has definitely started to look into. And I think the national pass rate is only around 60%. So overall, the pass rate for the exam isn't great to begin with. And DOC started to look into see if it's maybe a requirement in education that is what needs to be done. But it's something we've started to research into.
Do we know how many years we've been below the national average in California?
As far as I know, it has been that way for a very long time.
Yeah, maybe that needs to be looked at. Because I think that is, I did notice, I did read about it a couple of weeks ago and realized it was very, very low. So I'm not sure, in most testing situations, when you have a pass rate that's low, there's a problem. So I think we should try to identify what that problem is, or whether it's testing or if the students that are applying are not qualified to take the tests, but there's some issue somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mark, it's Glenn. So Talia, I did want to make a comment. In a prior board meeting, I'd asked for additional data because I really felt that we weren't really reflecting all the great work that you and the team are doing. The graph starting on page 37, I think, helped paint a better picture as far as the seasonality and different aspects of the application process that you and your team go through and how that affects our processing. Because there are the wait times, for example, to make sure that we get everything in that we need, but applicants start their process earlier than that, and I think some of these graphs can kind of demonstrate that. So thanks for putting that together.
Definitely, I'm glad that was helpful.
Any other comments or questions from the board members? Natalia, if you can walk me through some of these charts, or maybe the best way is to answer some questions. So on page 36, what's the difference between the line registered dispensing optician initial application and registered dispensing optician initial license? I'm not sure what the difference between what those two lines mean.
Definitely. Right now, all the optician applications have two parts to it, which is the initial application, which you mentioned, which is the bulk of what I need to get from them in order to process an application. Once I've approved that, there is an initial license, which is all it is they have to pay additional fee, and then I issue their license. It was done that way because the fees are separated out in statute. We are looking into just combining it all into one application so it's easier and we don't have two applications for almost the exact same thing. But for right now, that's how it works.
I see. So that explains why the initial application for the RDO is 209 days, because it sounds like the bulk of the work happens then.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. And then moving on to the charts. All right, so I get the bars. That is the kind of numbers of volume, the volume. The line, that is the processing time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so if I were looking at the first chart, exam request, that peak in October, that mean, what does that say? And then I see it drops and then peaks again, and then it becomes non-existent later on. What?
Yeah, so exam requests are a little particular since most of the time I don't even have to touch them; they're automatic. So that 60 days could have just been that somebody opened their exam request and didn't pay it till 60 days later. That's generally what it could be. As long as you make a payment for your exam request and include all your information, it acts like a renewal. It approves automatically. I don't have to touch it.
Oh, so it should be like 0 most of the time, unless someone.
Yeah, unless someone leaves their application open and pays it like a month later, which happens. I see it a lot.
Sleeper. Do you mind if I just interject ever so quickly? Would that spike also reflect the issues we've had with communication, so that once folks do their initial exam request, if we don't have an actual address that is useful, and if we don't have an email address, then they aren't getting those notifications?
So no, actually, because about maybe 2 or 3 years ago, ARSHA implemented a separate application to catch that information. So those people who aren't getting their exam information are actually in the next step of the process after the exam request already. So this is specifically just to make their first payment to take the exam and to be approved to take the exam, which is automatic completely.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you very much. Anything else for Ms. Leeper? All right.
I do actually have one more. I'm assuming this based on things that you've said in the past, but based on the bars on these graphs, this is how you work with Shara to determine support need for your team to ensure processing times stay reasonable. Is that correct?
Correct. It's not the only thing we look at, but it is definitely something we look at to determine whether or not support need. Because there might be some months where we're not getting a lot of applications, but we're sure getting a lot of emails from optometry applicants who want to know what they need to do for their law exam maybe 2 months before that. So it's definitely something we do use, but it's not the only metric I use when determining if we need additional support.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, the other observation I'm just reaching now is some of these lines go to 0 in February 2021 or March 2021. It's not that they're actually 0. It's just that we haven't hit those months yet, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any further questions for Ms. Leeper? All right. Hearing none. Let's move on to the next agenda item.
We actually do have one more. Cherie has one more report within the examination and licensing program.
Please.
Thank you. So we do have another staff update for the licensing program. In January, we conducted interviews to temporarily fill our vacant lead licensing analyst position. The hiring process we use employs multiple methods to ensure fairness and that the candidate we select is truly the best fit. We were very excited, but not at all surprised that Natalia successfully proved she was the best fit for the position. In the 2 years that Nat has worked with us, she has stepped up repeatedly to take on additional challenges. Nat has almost single-handedly issued most of the new licenses and registrations in the past year while interviewing and training new staff, preparing items for board meetings, doing outreach, working with DCA's OIS to make Breeze a more functional and user-friendly database, and providing support to her colleagues. I am so happy that we are able to offer this position to Natalia. There aren't always promotional opportunities available for staff in a small office like ours, and it's a joy and an honor to be able to recognize a staff member's contributions and professional growth by giving them a well-earned promotion. We have begun the process of filling the now vacant position in the Opticianry registration program so that Nat can turn her focus more completely to licensing lead duties. And as Nat said in her report, we're also seeking a retired annuitant to help us out with some of the licensing jobs.
Fantastic. That's great news, Shara. Ms. Murphy, I'm glad you interrupted me and stopped me from moving on to the next agenda because I think all of us are glad to hear about the news. Yes, applause. I know when I first joined the board, I said something like the Board of Optometry is kind of like the Oakland A's. We're a small market team, and we grow our staff, and they turn out to be superstars. And we have a great team, and every now and again they leave to go and play for the Yankees or the Dodgers, and it's regrettable, but it is our lot in that life. We can be proud that we're growing our own superstars. Okay. Anything else on the executive director's report, Shara?
Yes, so we'll move to item C, and our policy analyst, Mark Johnson, will take the presentation on that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I would just refer you to agenda item 5B, the regulatory updates. I'll first just a couple of comments about status of our existing regulatory packages. The first is AB 443, which allows TPA licensed optometrists to administer immunizations provided they meet certain conditions. This was the bill that allows optometrists to administer flu vaccines after they complete training and such. It does not affect any of the COVID vaccinations or immunizations or anything like that. It just is confined to the flu vaccine. That is actually out, is being published today by the Office of Administrative Law for our 45-day comment period. So the documents, the proposed text and the statement of reasons and such should be on our website by close of business today. And so we will be taking comments on that for the next 45 days. Once we complete that period, we will then begin the second phase of the process to get the regulation into law. The second comment is just the implementation of AB 2138, which you all will recall is the complicated bill last year relating to denial applications, revocation, suspension of licensure, and criminal convictions for optometry optician program applicants. That actually was approved yesterday by the Office of Administrative Law, and it is in law. We had asked for the regulation to be effective upon approval, so it was effective as of yesterday, February 25th. So that is good news. Looking at our future regulatory packages, just as a quick note about the three that we have, the requirements for the COMA certification, the board will be looking at as part of agenda item 7. The implementation of Assembly Bill 896, the Consumer Protection Committee looked at that yesterday. We will continue to be working on that and hope to bring that back to the CPC, I think, at the next meeting. And then the implementation of Assembly Bill 458, which allows optometrists to engage in the practice of optometry to home residents, was approved by the Consumer Protection Committee yesterday. So we will be working on that and bringing that to the full board at the next board meeting in May. That's it from my end. Please answer any questions.
Board members, any questions? Hi, David. Go ahead, David.
Hi. Since we're on this section now, I recall that a public member brought up an item regarding continuing education in relation to injections. Is that something, Mark, that would be appropriate for public comments on that bill as it's going through the process? Public comments, I mean, to the board regarding that bill?
Do you mean in terms of getting requiring? You're talking about Ms. De La Torre's comment.
Yes.
About that. I believe that would be appropriate. Yes.
Okay. I just want to know if this is the time just to bring that up. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
So I'll make a comment on that specifically. So I guess my question would be is, since the training that it takes right now technically may or may not be the normal CE process type, is it still appropriate for our practice and education committee to discuss how to deal with the training hours and whether or not or how it would count as continuing education? I guess that question is for President Morodomi.
I think the essence of your question is is this a matter that the Practice and Education Committee should consider, or another committee? Is that the essence of what you're asking?
Right. I'm assuming based on the comment that we had heard earlier, and my thought on it as well, is they are the typical group that approves CE or not and labels it. And in the past, we've had similar courses that counted for specific CE for existing licensees. And this being so new, I don't think there's been those determinations. So I'm assuming the process is very simple, that it would just be something that's deferred to that committee. I don't think it takes regulatory change.
The PEC would be happy to, we could look into it. I believe Ms. Delatorre had said it's a 20-hour course and they were going to take 15 hours and it was going to be therapeutic CE. So traditionally the schools have self-regulated and categorized their own CE, but since this is a new course and certification, the PEC could look into it if that is so the wish of the board.
I think we should take this up at our next meeting. We need to actually see which of those courses are comprising that 15 hours and how they apply towards the therapeutics requirement. So we need to look at them individually.
I think this issue actually was brought up last year, or maybe pre-COVID, by Western, because they were also offering an injection course, and they had stated something about number of hours that were going to be considered therapeutic. So I think PEC should look at it. Yes. Shara, can you add that also to the next PEC meeting next month?
Of course, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I have no objection to having PEC look at it, unless another committee chair out there says they'd rather look at it. But it seems we have some superstars on PEC willing and able to look at it. So.
And then one additional thing related to that, then, when the PEC talks about it, the Practice Education Committee talks about it, is there may be licensees that took the course that want to use it within a short time frame as part of their renewal process. So that might be an additional discussion point to just ensure that there's clarity on, what timelines they're be able to use it.
So usually CE is, I believe their certification that Ketchum offers is, the certification is good for 2 years. So I've been approached by numerous people who have taken the Ketchum course 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, that they were a little bit concerned about when the vaccination bill was finally going to become law, because they didn't want to have to retake it. So I guess the CE would be valid for the 2 years or within their licensure period or their.
Well, I think we'll need to take a look at it. I think that the board in previous discussion certainly said that training taken before the OAL package is approved, that training would still be able to count for a certificate for injection. I think we'd have to take a look at it a little bit more to see if you did take that, in the last year, is that it certainly counts towards certification, but are you able to retroactively apply that to CE, and in what year would that be? So I think there are definitely some considerations to think through before we blanket say that would be the case. So certainly you can discuss that during the PEC meeting.
David?
Sure. Just since we're talking vaccinations, and if I'm off track on this, just tell me to stop. Since right now with COVID vaccine, because there's emergency authorization for optometrists who have completed the course to go ahead and provide those vaccines. If that approval is coming from the DCA and the California Department of Public Health, am I correct that has nothing to do with the Board of Optometry?
That it actually, so it does not run through the Board of Optometry or the Department, or I'm sorry, or DCA. It is a certification or verification that's run through the Department of Public Health.
So CDPH. In the event that there was an adverse reaction brought on by an optometrist administering a vaccination, or the optometrist did something incorrectly, is the board the investigating agency on that, or is it CDPH?
I would have to take a look at that. I think that it would likely be CDPH because that's where the verification would come through. They've gone through the process of making sure that the courses have been taken, but we'll have to look at that. The waiver is new. We're still figuring out communication on all of that, and so we can certainly ask that particular question so that we've got clarity about that.
And then if an optometrist decided that he or she was going to get frisky and decided they'd do a flu shot as well as a COVID vaccination, I assume that is not approved. It's strictly COVID's right now, and that's it.
Correct. The waiver is for COVID vaccination and only COVID vaccination.
Okay, thank you.
And David, I believe the waiver is for that optometrists can only give vaccinations in a clinical. What was the wording, Shar? It's like public clinical setting. So you can't do it in a private office. It would be like in
so the waiver does give the ability for you to do it in a private office, and how about we just skip to E, to COVID-19 update? This is the biggest part of it, essentially.
Go ahead.
President Mordomi? So yes, so the waiver was approved by the director of DCA. The process will go through the Department of Public Health. So the waiver does allow optometrists to go through the correct courses and to certify basic life support certification. And be able to do vaccinations in a clinical setting, but also to do them in an office setting. Where we are right now in our response to the pandemic, there aren't enough vaccination supplies to set up those office setting clinics or those office setting vaccinations. So what we're asking folks to do is that if they have already taken this, and I was so excited to hear from Bonnie De La Torre that they've had 60 folks go through their injection courses over the last year, and now they're looking to incorporate the CDPH training that's required as well. So those folks who have gone through the steps that have been set out by CDPH and by the waiver, we're asking them to either, if you are part of a medical group, to get in contact with the clinical director for your vaccination center as a part of your medical group. And it's possible for what we're calling non-traditional vaccinators to become verified through that clinic, right? So we've already got a vaccination clinic that just is in need of more staff in order to put out the vaccination supply that they have been allocated. If you are part of a medical group that does that, like say Kaiser, or if you're part of a school that does it, like say Berkeley, then speaking with your clinical director in order to work through Department of Public Health to receive your verification and help within that clinic. If you're, go right ahead.
So I've had numerous people ask me how they would go about that process, because I tell them to go look at the waiver, and then they say that they talk to their medical directors, but they don't really know how to communicate with the department, CDPH, in order to finalize the process. So I have a whole bunch of ODs, or not a whole bunch, I have a few ODs that are trying to go through the process, but no one seems to really know exactly. They talk with the medical director and they're verified at the health centers, but now they don't know the next step.
So we don't have a lot of transparency on this because it isn't a process happening within our shop. But our understanding is that, essentially the medical director, if you work to become a vaccination site, then that same contact should be able to help them in verifying these non-traditional vaccinators as well in order to use their staff time within that clinic. That's what we've been told. We're trying to get some clarity on that. And I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for the feedback that that's what folks are being told when they do go to those clinic directors. We're trying to figure out how to more closely align the processes and give folks a direct route in order to do this. but it hasn't been made completely clear to us.
Yeah, because the clinic directors don't seem to know. I mean, they're verifying these non-traditional vaccinators, the optometrists, but then they don't really know what else to do after that. So I think that next step is there's general confusion for a lot of groups.
Okay, so we'll look into what sort of communication Department of Public Health might be able to give to clinical directors in order to activate those who have been verified. Okay,
perfect. Thank you.
If any verification or activation is necessary, right?
Someone has to verify that you've taken the injection course, that you've taken the CDPH 3-hour course, and that you have basic life support. So there are still requirements in order to enact the authority given by the waiver. And so that process needs to run through somewhere. We've been told it's Department of Public Health getting this feedback. We'll definitely go back to DCA and let them know that there is a lack of communication between Department of Public Health and those clinical directors as to how they then move forward once they've got all non-traditional vaccinators who want to be a part of their clinic operations.
Any other comments by members of the board?
Yep, it's Glenn. I have one more. So once we work through those things, Shara, there might end up being an opportunity for us to use our board website. And since it's such a kind of urgency, we might need to work with the DCA a little more urgently to get our website changed if there needs to be a link to the CDPH site. So I just wanted to throw that out as a potential, opportunity.
Certainly, and we've definitely been looking at that. There isn't a direct place that we can send non-traditional vaccinators. Right now, the CDPH link that we've got for non-traditional vaccinators says that they're not able to vaccinate, that we're not at a place with supply. But we know that those folks can be used, and so we've been working with with DCA executive and communications staff to understand that process better ever since the waiver was issued, so that we can give some sort of communication to our licensees. Again, I've been reluctant to do that because it hasn't been confirmed by CDPH, but we're working and asking daily to get some clarity on that process, and we certainly will at that point issue a listserv, place that on our website, and do a social media campaign so that folks can know how to go about doing this.
Yeah, because everybody that I talked to about COVID-19, everybody keeps saying, "Oh, I hope this is over. I hope this is over. I hope we're done with this. I hope we're done with this." But it being a virus, there's a chance that maybe not in this first round of vaccinations, but possibly next fall or the fall after, it could be an annual thing that becomes an opportunity. And this could be something that we undertake to change into law, correct? So once the waiver is over, we would have to, as a board, potentially look at a legislative process to make it permanent. I'm just thinking ahead, but I just want to make sure that we do whatever we can as a board to make it so that optometrists who have the ability and they are needed in the community, that they have a pathway that is as clear as possible through any assistance that we can provide for them to be able to help the community.
Certainly, and that is what we're trying to get to, and have been doing our best to try and get some clarity around. Most certainly, and we are also monitoring legislation. I think that there are some early bills. Right, we're not through introduction period, but some early bills that are looking at adding that COVID-19 ability to the vaccination ability for optometrists.
Shara, do we have an idea of how many boards or license variances were granted?
So I will try. We know that, of course, pharmacists were early on given COVID-19 because they were already doing flu shots. Physician's assistants, dental hygienists, dentists. There may be a few others as well. Each of them is a separate waiver, and their process, of course, is also different depending upon what authority they had before, and how the process will be tracked here. So there are a couple of other boards that have non-traditional vaccinators that are now coming into this process as well. And DCA is working with CDPH to produce some modules on how that will work. We're hoping that there will be communication early so that the folks who are here now and able to, be helpful can. But we know that there is also work being done so that once folks can open their own vaccination sites within their offices, that there's a clear process, and that'll be communicated by these modules that are being developed by DCA and CDHP collaboratively.
And is there an opportunity aside from the DCA site to perhaps link onto just the general state of California, more information about COVID? And then if you have a license or variance to support this effort, kind of go at it multiple different angles instead of just the optometry board has one. Each board has their own.
I think that is part of the collaboration that they are working on at this point. So I think that's how that will come together. There will be modules, and there will be a one place where non-traditional vaccinators will go in order to understand the process and just view modules specific to their profession. But as of right now, we're still trying to figure out how to use the folks who are ready and want to get out there and be helpful. And that we're trying to work that out and get some clarity on it.
And what is the date that the waiver is good through, or is it? Yes. Is it a set date or a declaration?
So, you know what? I am not absolutely sure. Most waivers have been 30 to 60 days and then extended. This might actually be, though, through the end of the declared emergency. More than likely, I think it might be that's it. I'm not recalling a particular date, and it has either been 30 or 60 days. That likely wouldn't come to the end of when these services are needed. So it is probably likely through the end of the pandemic.
Okay, so to Dr. Kawaguchi's comment of how do we ensure whether it's a flu shot, a COVID shot, or the next pandemic, should we as a board put this on the agenda to start looking into and move towards this process, not just as optometry, but perhaps a broader effort within the DCA family?
So I think for us, it really is about optometry. I think that that once we get through bill introduction, I think that there will be an opportunity for us to work with the legislature, with the author of that bill, in order to make sure, we add COVID, but we should also be looking forward at future pandemics. So of course we want to stay within scope, and it's clear through our negotiations that it's not the intent of the legislature to be able to vaccinate on everything and anything. But I think that there is an understanding that we need to be thinking about the next pandemic. And so we don't want to narrow the scope as much as we have before. And that we really do need to be able to activate folks in that way. So I anticipate that once we get through bill introduction, we will bring that back to you as an introduced bill, and then the board will be able to discuss its intent around that and then provide that to the legislature as a comment on a particular legislative vehicle.
And maybe something broader, and what body such as a WHO or whomever declares a national pandemic, or put some parameters around it. And I appreciate that we're looking at just optometry, but it would seem to me that we likely are not the only ones thinking ahead. It'd be good to know if we've got someone in the state who's looking towards sponsoring something broader than just our single. We can start with our single scope, but it would be good to know if it was much broader.
Any other comments by members of the board? Shar, do you want to say anything more about the COVID-19 response? No? Okay.
That's our major update. I believe that we might have some folks in. Again, I'm going to do this and then put people on the spot. But I think we have some folks who are in the attendee list who might be able to also give some comment or want to give updates on their work around preparing more optometrists to be able to provide this. If you're willing, Mr. President, perhaps we could open the chat.
That's a great idea. In fact, why don't we open up the for public comment? We've discussed the enforcement program, the examination program, the regulatory update, and the COVID-19 update so far. So if any members of the public wish to speak on any of those items, we welcome hearing from them.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please click that icon with a question mark within the square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, and it looks like we do have one individual who has requested public comment. Bonnie Delatorre. Bonnie, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 10-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Thank you, board, for talking about and referring to the PEC committee about continuing education. But I just wanted to give you a comment because we have a pharmacy school also. And because there's been so much confusion, well, I've taken all the courses due to the waiver. How do I get, volunteer? And Shara was generous enough to give me all the information, but still it's confusing. So I asked a pharmacist, one of our APHA trainer, I go, what does a pharmacist have to do? Because this is a new scope of practice for them too. And due to COVID, many of them now want to vaccinate, where previously they didn't want to vaccinate, but it's necessary. The hospitals, their employers want them to vaccinate. The people that are getting the COVID vaccine now need more immunizers. So she said they don't go through the board ever. They just get certification. So they would go to their director, show, I completed the APHA online. I completed the APHA assessment successfully, which they would receive certificates. I've taken the COVID-19 modules, and here's my BLS certificate, which there's a waiver in place now that it can be expired, but one has to either be expired or not. So all they have to do is show that information to the medical director and they can vaccinate. Just wanted to give you that comment. I don't know if that's what I've been telling my optometrists who have completed all these courses to try that avenue. I don't know if it helps, but that's the only thing I know to tell them. Thank you.
Thank you. That seems to make sense. Our representative from the Department of Consumer Affairs said that the waiver is self-implementing, self-affecting, that no one needs to get a special piece of paper from the Department of Consumer Affairs or anyone, as long as they meet the conditions of what's in the waiver. Just like if you're a nurse, you don't have to show anything special to say you can do these vaccinations because you're a nurse, because you meet the minimum qualifications, you get to do the injections. Anyway, I'll quit editorializing. Do we have any other members of the public? Moderator, I believe you only said there was one.
Yes, this is the moderator. It looks like there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, Q&A panel is now closed.
So, Ms. Murphy, I think we can now go back up to D, the strategic plan update.
Yes, which is very minimal in that in the in the president's message, you were all given the final published copy of our strategic plan. You've also been provided and should be soon available on the web, the pre-action planning inquiry that staff will be going through over the next week. And then on March 5th, we will sit down with Solid and review those pre-action plans and put together an action plan. We know that the chair has made it, the president has made it a priority for the committees and the committee chairs to be a part of the oversight and progress of the strategic plan. So once we do work on that action plan and have those completed, we'll bring those to the appropriate committees in order to let them know how our progress will be moving forward. And then, of course, those committee chairs can report to the board at the full board meeting the progress and their thoughts and the proceedings of those discussions. So that will be the process that we have for continuing with the implementation of the strategic plan and then reporting to the board what our steps are and setting up the structure of the board and the president of the board have asked for.
Any comments by board members? Thank you, everyone, for working so hard on the strategic plan. We completed just in time so that we are prepared to testify before the legislature on the sunset and our sunset hearings coming up in the next month or two. So I hope they appreciate our work. Item F, Ms. Murphy?
Certainly. Oh, I apologize. It looks like. Oh, no, I apologize. So item F is an update on the federal contact lens rule. We were watching this last year, did not have an opportunity to comment in the process. It was intended that these new rules would become in effect in October. They sort of did, but then were late last year, early this year, delayed until an implementation date of March 31st. We have not gone through a complete legal review, but staff has taken a look and understanding, of course, that the federal contact lens rule supersedes our statute. We have just listed for you the places where we see there being an issue. And we'll just, with the action of the president, ask that we engage in a full legal review and then discuss this within the Consumer Protection and Public Outreach Committee. But wanted to give, this was requested as a specific board meeting agenda item, and so wanted to bring back an update and then also our process steps moving forward.
Do we have any discussion by members of the board? I have one question, perhaps for our legal counsel, that she doesn't necessarily have to answer right this moment, but it is something I ponder. Our executive officer said that because these are federal regulations, they supersede, maybe that was the verb you used, supersede our authority. I question whether that's necessarily always true. You know, it's not always true that the things that the feds say dictate what we do, particularly since we regulate we have aspects of the profession that we can regulate. So as we go through this and consider it, it's something I think we should keep in mind. Okay. Thank you.
I think we want to reference the actual rule itself then. And I'm pulling to that. So Rule 315.11, effect on state and local laws. State and local laws and regulations that establish a prescription expiration date of less than 1 year or that restrict prescription release or require active verification are preempted. 315.11b, any other state or local laws or regulations that are inconsistent with the act or this part are preempted to the extent of the inconsistency. So I think there is an intent that this sets a national standard. If we want to go beyond the national standard, then I think we want to do a full legal review and take a look at how it will affect particularly and possibly other parts of the statute, but particularly the two that we have listed in the memo. One being the professional discretion to release, and then the other having a more exact time frame on when an attempt to promptly confirm the information of a prescription is now at federal exacted at 8 business hours.
That's very interesting. I'm sure our lawyers will look at that and determine what the meaning of preemption means. Yeah, I don't know the details of what we want to do or what our statute says. So I can't really say whether we directly conflict or we embellish upon the federal laws is something that we can take a look at. I think, Deborah, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I have a question. As far as the 8-hour rule here, I always thought that was in place. I guess that it more strictly defines what that is. But to me, the major update was actually increased responsibility by the prescriber more than anything. All of the responsibilities required of the sellers, they were pretty much the same, but now the prescribers have additional things that they have to do, such as signed copies of contact lens prescription release, having to keep a record of that for a certain number of years. I believe it's 3 or 4 years. Where did this stem from? Who enacted this whole thing and to make the change?
So there was a process through the Federal Trade Commission, who oversees the rule, where by public comment was taken. There were negotiations with stakeholders. We unfortunately did not have an opportunity to participate in that last year due to staffing and other board priorities, but wanted to be sure as we were going through, and I believe it was comments made as we were going through the optician review, statute review, as we were looking at the laws pertaining to prescriptions and to distribution or dispensing, that we wanted to be sure that we were following what would be done on the national level so as to understand whether or not there were changes that we would want to make to statute.
I guess I'm just trying to determine, what was the major concern that they had to enact changes? Was it a concern that practitioners weren't releasing prescriptions?
Deborah, I think I might have a little insight. So I think that it came from 1-800 contacts because they wanted to ensure that patients' prescriptions were making it out of the offices to their business. So that was the initial push to require this.
Really, all they ever had to do was call an office, though. So I don't see how it makes anything easier in the long run. It just increases obligations to the people involved in the process. Now, obviously we can't do anything about it. It's a federal thing, but I just wanted to, question it, raise the awareness of like what really changed. What did we accomplish for consumer safety? Just something for everyone to just kind of mull over. Think about that.
That's Dave. This has nothing to do with consumer safety. This is all about retail.
Thank you. Yes.
My term ends in June, so I can say what I want.
You've got a year grace period, sir.
In that case, I take it back.
David, I've known you a number of years. I did not know you were holding back all these other years. Any other further comment? Thank you, Shara, for bringing this before the board. It was of interest to me. We should study it and see what it means. It sounds pretty much like the train has left the station, however, and without any input from this board, I would hope that the Optometrists Association had some input. All right, so that was 5F. Did that bring us to 5G? You're on mute.
Yes, that does. Oh, there we go. Yes. Give me just one moment. Moderator, if you would be so kind as to promote to panelist Dr. Heidi Linser. And I believe that unfortunately we're losing Dr. Montez due to another scheduling conflict.
This is a moderator. I apologize. Could you repeat the name?
Of course, Dr. Heidi Linser.
Oh, thank you. All right, Heidi, can I get a quick mic check from you?
This is Heidi.
Wonderful. We can hear you. Thank you.
So Heidi's here to answer any additional questions that we might have, and just to walk us through their thought process on this as well. As you all know, we spent several meetings, many months, wanting to make sure that we were not hindering the opportunity for students to move into the profession by requiring the NBEO Part 3. We had several hearings where we brought in representatives from NBEO. And then at the last October 23rd board meeting, staff in the Office of Professional Services were asked to sit down and take a look at additional models that might allow us alternative means of verification. And so what you have before you is a chart that looks at those models that were discussed. Those came from our conversations, from the board's discussions during those previous hearings. And so what you'll see here is that we looked at using a California created practical exam, so basically a state-specific exam. And then we also wanted to look into a verification program that would occur during the academic years of the student, so that their practice would validate, their study would validate their practical skills. And so we took a look into this and understand that, there are some definite pros to these systems, but also coming through to understand the constraints that we would come up against if looking to enact this sort of system. So particularly the fact that we would require an increased budget in order to develop an examination or to develop a program. And then, of course, increase staff. That would require the BCP process. Then also that the development of the exam is typically 2 to 3 years. Development of a program in reviewing course material and understanding how practical skills are practiced within individual courses would have a different timeline, but would also require some study by the board. We then come into the issues of that there would not be a reciprocity, right? So we do continue to think about the mobility of applicants. And if we have a state-specific examination, then we would be looking at creating agreements with each of the jurisdictions that our licensees are looking to transfer to. And then also too, we heard from OPES throughout our previous hearings that they are moving other boards away from the use of a state-specific clinical exam. One, because the cost, the time, but also then the rigor needed to continue the validity of the test has not been something that most boards could keep up, and so are actually actively moving programs away from such a system. And so coming to what we really are encouraging the board to do, and some other creative things that we can take a look at as well, but really sticking with the national standard. That at this point there isn't an extra cost to the board. And we'll remind everyone, of course, that not until next fiscal year do we have funding secured for the creation of our law exam. And so we're just getting that we've been administering this entire time. And then that we can rely on NBEO to continue the rigor. We've heard several presentations and affirmed by OPES that we have an excellent testing partner. They create an excellent test that has rigor that is up to national standards and has served us well, although maybe not exactly as we would like. But we have now gone through 1.5 graduation cycles where all of our applicants have been able to take that exam. You'll recall that we did a survey of applicants from our 3 California optometry schools and colleges, and know that at this point, most of our applicants for 2021 have taken their exam or will within the next 90 days. We also know that we have seen other jurisdictions, including those on the West Coast, continue to use this national standard throughout the 2 graduation cycles of the COVID pandemic. And have not reported, we're in monthly conversations with Arizona, Texas, Washington, Oregon, and none have reported COVID-19 infections for those who have traveled to the the North Carolina, Charlotte testing center. So what we're suggesting to the board at this point is, after our research with OPES and our analysis, that we continue to use the national standard. We'll continue to look into the continuing passage rates, travel rates, and any infection reports that occur. And I think that, as we're also talking through our sunset, this, of course, has been a hot topic. We know our legislature has been looking into this as well. That what we can look at is perhaps a blueprint that would work with other Western states. If, in fact, we had a pandemic with greater travel restrictions, or if at some time there were an instance where the Charlotte, North Carolina center is inoperable, that it would make sense for us to look at a blueprint and working with our Western state partners to develop some sort of contingency planning so that we are able to move forward if, in fact, we do come up against a situation where the site is not available, or we do have more restrictive travel concerns. So we're bringing this back to you to let you know how we're moving forward, and of course to take any comments from the board.
Board members, do we have any comments?
I think we had already discussed this before, but in addition to all the other options that you just mentioned, Shara, we might want to just continue our conversations with NBEO to encourage a second site on the West Coast for all those schools that are west of the Mississippi.
Yes, I think that we certainly should. It's interesting, though, that through that monthly communication I've had with the other executive officers of our Western states, this has not been an issue that's been discussed in any of their states. So I think that we would have, I know, I've checked twice. I'm just like, I just want to make sure no one else is talking about this. Texas, Arizona, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, those states didn't feel a pressure and didn't have, I think, the same level of issue rise to the boards, or didn't rise to the board's level. And so it's not something that they are looking at. But I think that we certainly, as California being leaders, can say to our Western state partners, it didn't happen this time, but let's look at a blueprint where if in fact we know, other pandemics are coming, if greater travel restrictions are ever enforced, or if, because it is a single site, if there is an issue with, the ability to administer the test in Charlotte, what do we as Western states do together? So I think that that's certainly something that staff is going to continue to do. I'm hearing from the legislature that they would want us to do that as well. Have something in place so that we know what we're looking at if we get to that situation again, and can enact a plan that we've already started to put together. It will start, though, I think, with some advocacy and talking to our Western states and saying we should have a contingency plan in case next time we're not able to get our graduates out to Charlotte.
This is Sid. Can you advise, is that a single building site?
I cannot. I believe that it is, Sid. But again,
if that building,
it's one building.
Yeah, if that building, something happens to it, burns to the ground, whatever it may be, this isn't just about a pandemic. This is just about general resilience in order to keep our ability to test and to ultimately license the future doctors, optometrists in the state of California. So, yeah, I'd hate for us to just rely upon a single building from a single provider. It is a single point of failure.
Don't worry, Sid. As soon as I started talking, I was like, this is right up Sid's alley. She'll completely see. You can't rely on one. Like, this is the worst contingency plan. So I think that we will certainly start to draft a blueprint and come back to the board and looking at how we would overcome the inoperability of that one particular site, or the increased or more restrictive travel mandates coming up. I think that it does make sense for us to look at how we would keep licensing and keep moving folks into the profession, continuing to provide services to consumers.
And I think of these other states, we just approach it from COVID. everything was about the pandemic. This board is now looking broader than the single pandemic. There are more pandemics coming, but there's also other catastrophes that could happen. So yeah, if you could please, my professional brain is exploding right now with, this is a total single point of failure. And we are on notice that it is a single point of failure. We are the state of California. Let's get out there, folks.
Any other comments by members of the board?
Yep, it's Glenn. I think one of the things that separates us as a state is that we have 3 large optometry schools putting out a lot of graduates, and we also have a very, very high population of optometrists. Pretty much, I would assume that we're top 3. I'm just going to assume that for right now since I don't have the data in front of me. So we do serve a very large population of consumers as well as licensees. And to Sid's point, when we don't have a backup plan, it puts a lot of people at risk. So I think that if the other state boards had a chance to understand what we're starting to think about, and it's more than just COVID-19, I think that it would raise an awareness with them as well to think about it the way that Sid just did, which is what happens. So are we not going to license anybody? Are we okay with that? And I don't think any other board is going to say, yeah, that's fine. We don't need other licensees. So I think it's going to be ongoing conversation. So even though I agree with the staff recommendation at this point, I do think it should be a continued conversation. I would like to continue to hear from NBEO. I think that they've done a great job in changing the communication level with us, and I appreciated that change, and I want to make sure that we don't lose that. So I want to make sure that we have that going on as well.
Anyone else? Reviewing the minutes, I think the schools wanted some sort of temporary or stopgap licensing. Are any of the schools, or do we have any members of the public that want to speak on this? Are the schools on listening to this? Because I would like, as we go through next steps, hear from the schools. They were pointing out that though there was nothing that could be done for the COVID-19 pandemic, they too were interested in seeking alternatives for the next pandemic, and their input would be appreciated.
Excellent. I also want to remind everyone, though, that when we did do that survey of the 237 potential graduates for 2021, there was little to no interest in that sort of temporary licensure or lower licensure with practice with supervision. So we're not seeing from students, and we, of course, we can delve into that deeper with additional surveys, but we're not seeing that within the applicant population that there would be a desire to seek out a temporary or lower level of licensure that would be overseen by a fully licensed optometrist.
I don't know if we want, I'm going to throw it out there. I'm happy with another member of the board to stand up a working group to look at this. We've been talking about testing now. I don't know, Dr. Wong, we've been talking about it for what, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I think the entire time I've been on the board, which I think is 5 years. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, we can have a working group. I mean, we talked with NBEO a lot. It's just,
I think it needs to be a little bit bigger and broader as we look at testing in the future of testing in California. From a location standpoint, it's a single point of failure. What are we going to do? And approaching then, equipping this team, our staff, with information that is more strategic in risk management to approach other states.
mm-hmm.
might cast a different lens on this instead of it's COVID or it's just that single focus that we started off with 5 years ago.
Can we get? Do we have any public comment on this before we kind of close? Seek direction. Moderator.
This is the moderator. At the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click that icon with a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, this is the moderator. It looks like at this time there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Do we have any board members that would be interested in participating in a work group, or stated another way, Shara, what would be most helpful to you and your staff to begin looking at this? Do you want staff to look at it first and then send it to a committee or create a work group, or would you like to create a work group now to help you? Whatever is most efficient for your under your resources.
I think for us it would be to start start something, to have something to bring back to you. I think that we need to look at the sorts of MOUs that are created between other professions and their testing vendors. We could bring that to the work group, or we could bring it to one of our committees, and then from there a work group could be created in order to. I think we've got some staff research to do on the back end that we can then bring to either a work group or committee. Either is fine.
All right. Well, let me ask this: Are there any members of the board that want to participate in a 2-member work group, or is there a particular committee chair they would like to bring it into their committee? I am not seeing an overwhelming response.
We're thinking.
Okay.
I would be happy to be part of the work group. I don't know what committee you think it should.
It was an either or. It was either we create a work group or we send it to a committee. One or the other, not both.
I would be happy to be part of the work group. I've heard a lot of discussions already that we've had in the past. So
I think that would be an excellent work group of Ms. Brandbein and Dr. Wong, and of expertise for us to continue those discussions. So we will have it within staff agenda to begin that kind of get those initial pieces into order, and then bring them to you for your expertise on both of the professional and the resiliency side, and then figure out where we go from there in order to engage those other states and to begin to make a blueprint for that.
Great. I mean, of course, reach out to the schools. We've lived a year in the pandemic, so what they said a few months ago may have changed based on experience. Mm-hmm. Second, the way you make things change in the world is you kind of nudge them along, and California has the ability to put things on the table that cause other folks to think, oh, well, we better do something before California forces us to do it. So we can be innovators in this area. Anything more on 5G? All right, let's move on to, does that bring us to 6?
Mr. President, could I suggest a 5-minute break?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry about that. Let's take a 5-minute break. So let's say it's 2:20 now. Let's break till 2:25 or close to it.
Okay.
Thank you for enduring with us.
2 cups of coffee,
One more person for a quorum. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, we have a quorum. Great. Well, thank you for that suggestion for a break. Madam Board Counsel, although we're meeting virtually, it's like we're in a room together virtually. So if a board member needs to leave the room for whatever reason, bio break or whatnot, board members are permitted to do that. And well, except we might lose a quorum. The only problem with that is we can lose a quorum. Is that right, Board Counsel? Oh, I guess she's not there. All right, well, I can ask her offline. Shall we move on to item, oh, Madam, there we go. Shall I move on to item 6? Board minutes. Ms. Murphy?
Certainly. Yes, please.
Shar, are you pulling up the minutes? Shar, are you pulling up the minutes?
Oh, I apologize. I can certainly do so.
And I think at this point I can merely ask members of the board if they have any changes or corrections to the minutes published by our staff. So why don't we go first with let's see now, the board meeting minutes of Friday, September 18th. Do we have any changes, alterations by the board members? Okay. Let's move on to the minutes of October 23rd. Any corrections? All right, I don't see any corrections there. And then the board meeting minutes of November 20th. Do we have any corrections to those minutes? Great. And then the board meeting minutes for December 11th, 2020. Any corrections? And I think that's it. Any further discussion about the minutes? If not, I'd appreciate a motion and a second.
I do have a comment. So I was not in attendance on the September 18th meeting. My preference would be if we take a vote for each individual. But
Very good.
I mean, I know I could do the whole thing, but I reviewed all the minutes. So
Actually, if we're going to do it that way, why don't we open up the forum to the public for any comments on this agenda item?
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please click that icon with a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. This is the moderator. Looks like at this time there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, Q&A panel is now closed.
Glenn, I'm sorry, what was the meeting that you said that you wanted to separate out? Oh, you're on mute.
The first one, September 18th.
All right. So why don't we vote on September 18th, and then we can vote on the other three en masse. So I'd like a motion. I'd appreciate a motion to approve the minutes of September 18th, 2020.
I'll make the motion.
And I'll second.
Moves.
Dave will second.
David seconds. Any further discussion? All right, let's do a roll call vote.
Did you want me to do that for you?
Oh, if you would, please. Yeah, sure.
Okay, regarding the September 18th board minutes, we'll vote on that. Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
I vote aye.
Ms. Brandvine,
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre, aye, Dr. Kawaguchi,
Abstain.
and Mr. Moridomi.
Aye. All right, that passes. All right, the next motion I would appreciate is a motion to approve the minutes of October 23rd, November 20th, and December 11th together.
I'll move to approve those.
So Dr. McIntyre moves.
I'll second it.
Dr. Wong seconds. Let's go ahead and vote.
Okay. We'll start with Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
Aye.
Ms. Brandvine,
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre, aye, Dr. Kawaguchi,
Aye.
and Mr. Moridomi.
Aye. Great. I found the minutes were very helpful in reviewing stuff that we've done. I hope it's not taking staff too much time to go through them. I think in instances where staff or members of the public or members of DC submit written reports, the need to write too much of what they say is becomes diminished. So just trying to lessen the load of staff to the extent we can.
You'll never convince us, sir. Really, complete minutes have been such a tool for us as a staff as we have turnover for folks to understand what was done and what was said and what the nature of the board's intent is. So we try to give you concise so that they're readable, but they're also a fantastic tool for us to keep moving even if the players on our team change.
All right. Well said by the captain of the Oakland A's. Let's move on to item 7, discussion of regulation section 1571. Who will present that?
We'll have Mark Johnson step up for presentation, and I'm sure that he would appreciate the help of Dr. Wong as the chair of the committee, as well as the other doctors who sit on the Practice and Education Committee. Mark?
Thank you, Shara. So this was discussed earlier today in the PEC meeting. It passed out of the Practice and Education Committee on a 4-0 vote with no changes. Just as a short background, California Code of Regulations Section 1571 sets out the requirements for glaucoma certification for optometry licensees. And in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Ketchum University was granted a director's waiver to offer their Grand Round certification program online as a live course. So this proposed regulation would just make a change to 1571 subsection B. It deletes the requirement that patients must be evaluated in person. So they will be able to do these online. And I know that that 3 of our doctors from the PEC had attended the courses and found no issues with them, and obviously would invite them to elaborate on any thoughts there.
So in the past, if you graduated before 2007, optometrists, if they wanted to be glaucoma certified, had to do a glaucoma certification course. And in the regs, it says that it has to be done in person. Because of COVID, Ketchum requested to have a virtual grand rounds, and it was a 2-day course. It took the same exact amount of time for in-person education, but it was just done virtually. And they did a really good job. And so the question is now, in the future, for more additional glaucoma courses, should we allow them to be done virtually? And it looks like it's a good format. One of the things to note also is that the number of glaucoma certification courses that are being offered have drastically been reduced, probably due to the number of optometrists that are already now glaucoma certified. So I think this is a good avenue for the future. And if we were to approve this, Ketchum had to request a waiver in order to have their class virtual. But I think taking out the patients must be evaluated in person phrase would make it so that other schools or other education centers could have virtual courses for glaucoma certification. And I was actually present for both days of the course, so I was there the whole time, and it was a good course.
Fantastic. Thank you for that work, Lynn. Any other member of the board wish to comment or ask questions?
It's Glenn. I have a question for the PEC. So I guess my question is on the wording that we're proposing. It's a very simple change. Because I'm looking at page 52, number 3. It says participation in group discussion of the cases with instructor feedback. So do we believe that that's enough to ensure that the change is live training?
So you think we need to have a phrase that says live training?
I don't know. I'm just asking the question. I just want to make sure that it's clear that it's not. It shouldn't be something that's just recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Mark Johnson, did you have a comment on that? Because I'm sure that you worked on the verbiage on this.
You know, this was a relatively simple change. I think your point is probably a good one. If we're going to need to make a little more specificity that it needs to be live, I think we could do that. Sure.
Okay. Any more comments? Do we want to do the wordsmithing now to cover that these presentations or the courses have to be live, or can that be done after we do the vote with a statement of intent by this board?
This is Mark. I think probably voting to approve the measure or approve this motion with delegation to staff to specify that the courses must be live and live, etc. I'm sure that would probably meet OAL's threshold for approval, in my opinion.
All right, I'm fine with that. That seems very efficient. Perhaps to ask staff that the final draft be reviewed by Member Wong as chair of the committee. All right, any further discussion? All right, then let's see now. I see the motion. We need to modify in the staff report. We need to modify it a little bit to include that additional instruction to the staff. Anyone want to give a shot at making that motion?
I could try. Let me try. So I move to approve the proposed text for California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 1571, as presented and discussed, including conversations to clarify live in-person training, and direct staff to submit the text to the Office of Administrative Law for posting for a 45-day public comment period, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for hearing.
Thank you, Glenn. Ms. Bond, is that sufficient for OAL's purposes?
I think that covers what you need at this point.
Okay. All right. Do we have a second?
I just want to be clear, because I think that Dr. Kawaguchi said for live and in person, which would mean that we're keeping it as is.
No, not. So I accept that as an amendment. If I said in person, I did not mean in person.
I didn't think you did, but that is what you said, and so I want to make sure that we go back and clean it up so that we're not pulling directly from minutes and enacting what I think you didn't mean to say.
So I choose to modify my motion to not include the word in person.
Okay. I think that's clear. It's clear to me as to what I'm voting on. I think it's clear to staff as to the precise language of the motion. I'm sorry, did we have a second? Sid Van Vine seconds. Clearly she's seconding the cleaned up version of Glenn's motion. Do we have any further discussion by members of the board? Do we have any comment by members of the public?
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this motion, please click that icon with a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. And it looks like we do have an individual who has requested public comment. Give me one moment while I get my timer ready. Individual identified as Tiffany Witherspoon. Tiffany, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 10-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to comment and just get a little clarification, I guess, within the comment. This is Tiffany from Western University, Director of Continuing Education, and this is something that we've been looking into for an extended period since the COVID pandemic as to how to provide the course online. And so we've looked at different variations of ways to do it. And so moving forward, I guess the question would be with submitting to the board, is there going to be a specific manner in which you want us to present it? Do we need to follow the model that SECO has done? Or do we just present what we're looking to provide and then get an approval or a denial? I'm just looking for a little bit more clarification in regards to how this will be allowed to be put together.
So hi, this is Dr. Wong. I guess Ketchum, to me, when we audited their course, it very much resembled what I assumed the in-person course would have been, with discussion, with interaction. The only part where it was, I mean, obviously the whole thing was virtual, but what was nice was that they had very good optics on all of their equipment, so that all of the participants could see the optic nerve, they could see inside the eye. So I would assume that your program would very much probably reflect what you currently have had in the past, with live participants doing the program, it would, I guess I don't, I'm not doing it. Do you anticipate your virtual program being significantly different than what you used to offer to optometrists when they would actually have to attend in person?
No.
So I think if you were to just present that to the board, I think you should just present that to the board, especially if your program virtual is not going to really deviate from what you've had in the past.
We were already providing a scope in the classroom previously, so I don't foresee it being anything different. I just was looking for clarification because I have no frameworks of what was done by Marshall B. Ketchum, because we weren't in the class and we haven't seen the recordings.
Okay. So it was my understanding, and from watching it, it seemed what they offered was very similar to probably what they had offered had it been an actual in-person course.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Wong or Mr. Johnson, do we issue a certification or piece of paper to the school that's providing the course, or we don't do that for the live course, so we would not do that for the virtual course either. Is that correct? That's correct.
I think Marshall B. Ketchum had us, or we watched it because we wanted to see if their program, if their virtual program was, since it was, their virtual program was the first one that was ever being offered for glaucoma certification. That's why we watched it. So if Ketchum were to offer another one, I don't believe the board would have to certify it. It would just be under the assumption that the schools would offer a program virtual that was similar to what they had offered for live participants.
So it's self-implementing.
So statute actually does set out that the course should be approved by the board. I think that courses have not changed since the implementation of, since the expansion of scope to treating glaucoma. And so I believe that at some time, those grand rounds given by Ketchum and by Western were reviewed by the board. And so we would want to go through an approval process with Western in changing this delivery of method. There we go. Sorry about that.
Shar, you could have cut me off eons ago by just saying that.
Uh-oh. I apologize. So yeah, we would love to have, I think, Western come back to PEC and run through a similar process that SCCO did, just because it has been a long time since these were originally approved by the board.
All right. Does our member of the public want to make any further comments based on that very important information? All right. Any further discussion by members of the board? Very good. I believe it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I've forgotten. Have we already had a motion in a second?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
We need to vote.
All right. Let's vote. Dr. McIntyre, please.
Okay, commencing with the vote. Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky.
Aye.
Dr. Garcia.
I vote aye.
Ms. Brandvine.
Aye.
And Dr. McIntyre, aye. Dr. Kawaguchi. Dr. Kawaguchi.
Oh, sorry. Did you hear me?
Oh, I
Aye.
can hear you. Oh, okay, heard you now. And Mr. Moridomi.
I vote aye. All right. Passes unanimously. The next item is item 8, future agenda items. Do members of the board have suggestions as to any future agenda items that we have not already talked about in this board meeting that are already on the staff's plate? Yes, Dr. Ferresi.
Hi there. Something that I've brought up in the past, and I don't know where it stands. but if nothing's happening on it, I'd like to bring it up again. Section 3109 of Optometry Laws and Regulations, accepting employment from non-licensee, right of incorporation. It goes through there that an optometrist can work for a physician and surgeon who practices in the specialty of ophthalmology. And I think it would really be beneficial to the public if we could get rid of the specialty of ophthalmology part. As I have brought up on numerous occasions, there are optometrists who do traumatic brain injury work and visual perception work that would be very beneficial working in a neurologist's office, but they cannot work for that neurologist because the neurologist is not an ophthalmologist. And I see no benefit to the public by having that one caveat in there that the physician and surgeon has to be an ophthalmologist. I think it restricts the public's access to various methods of care. So I'd like that to be looked at and see if we can make modifications in the future.
Okay. Fair enough. That seems like a reasonable request for the board to discuss. We have a member of the board seeking to amend a regulation. And I imagine there's probably other board members who are interested in the topic to make a decision on that, whether to make that change or not.
I just want to make sure. I think that Dr. Turetsky is actually looking for a statutory change.
Oh, is that? Oh, I'm sorry. That
is statute.
Excuse me.
That's not reg. That's statute.
Just to be sure that so that staff would move forward in the appropriate manner.
Yeah. The term ophthalmologist was added, I think, like 15 years ago because it didn't exist in statute prior to that. I don't know why it was added, but it needs to go, in my humble opinion.
So this needs to be set before a committee for just further discussion and thinking.
So I have a question related to this proposed agenda item. Since there seems to be a question on whether or not it's statutory or regulatory.
It is statutory. It is statutory.
Okay, so, but an ophthalmologist is already an MD. We're just clarifying, broadening the type of MD. So if we don't have to go through a statutory process, that would be much easier. So, I mean, if there's any risk that we could just do it via regulatory, I think we should look into that.
This might be the kind of thing that's perfect for discussion by the committee to flesh out which it is rather than during this agenda.
Yeah, so let's send to the Ledge Reg Committee if there's any question between the interaction between the legislation and the regulation.
And that's all I've got.
Thank you, David. Any other members of the public, members of the board have any future agenda items? Why don't we open up to the public and see if they have any suggestions?
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a public comment on future agenda items, please click that Q&A icon at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, this is the moderator, and it looks like at this time there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
All right.
Hey, David, can I ask a follow-up question? I was kind of thinking that through. On the surface, that request seems very reasonable, but I just don't want to create any unintended consequences. So could you read that again? How the ophthalmologist specialty language was.
So I'm gonna interrupt here if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because it's not actually on this agenda, it's an idea for a future agenda item.
Okay.
And save all that so that all the discussion about how it works is later. Thanks.
All right.
If I may, though, just for Jeff's clarification, it's 3109.
There you go. All right. There's no need for board action on item 7. Excuse me, on item 8. That leads us to item number 9, adjournment. I'm getting a salute from David Dr. Tereski. David, I missed your chocolates. I'm gonna have to, write a letter to the governor's office objecting to the virtual meetings for the absence of chocolates. If there's no other matters, it was great seeing all of you. I anticipated this meeting would go into the dinner hour, but fortunately it has not. Thank you very much. Everyone has conducted this meeting very efficiently with excellent insights and comments. I always look forward to seeing everyone. I wish I could see you in person. And if you have get your second shots, please come by Oakland and say hello. All right. Shara, any last words?
Not at all, sir. Thank you, everyone. Board members, for your time. Thank you, public members, for also joining us today, or stakeholders for joining us today. We appreciate your input.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Good weekend.